to demystify that, joining me in studio is the chairman of the Volunteer Association of Kenya, Mr. Meshach Odede. Of course, a very warm welcome to the studio this hour.
Thank you.
All right, and maybe if you just to begin, we understand that volunteers contribute to a huge percentage of the GDP in the country, about 236 billion shillings. That's about 3.7%, as we have just rightly said so a bit ago. So maybe you can just talk to us about this and how this has been able to occur, that volunteerism has been able to actually be a big contributor of the economy.
Yes, if I may take you a little back to understand the background of this. The VIO Society is a network of member organizations working with and through volunteers in Kenya. This is now bringing 27 member organizations. Among the member organizations are organizations which are very well known, like the Kenya Red Cross, for example, VSO, Kenya, UNV, and many others. So these organizations came together back in the year 2004 to organize themselves and to see how volunteerism can be done in a well-structured manner. But that is not where we left it. After many years, we tried to engage with the government through different ministries, because every other regime, volunteerism as a sector was moved from one ministry to the other, depending on how that parliament or that particular president organizes his cabinet or ministries. So after some times, we got ourselves under the Ministry of Labor, and that is where our journey for the national volunteerism policy began. And then we engaged very well, and we got a very good will from the government running the ministry then. And then we moved forward very fast, cooperating between volunteer organization society together with the government and a few other stakeholders, of course. People like Dr. Manu Chandaria were there, and a few other individuals like Professor Magoha and the rest. That is when we first began the work about the policy. So it is the policy that has that research bit as part of the implementation of it. So once the policy was adopted in 2016, in February, by the cabinet, then we were able to look at the implementation framework. And among the things that are in the policy that we needed to implement was to conduct a research or a survey in the country to understand more about the state of volunteerism in Kenya. So that is how the research was later on conducted. It was commissioned by the ministry together with the VIO Society in partnership. And that is the research that gave us a finding that actually more than 13 million, slightly above 13 million people in Kenya are volunteering. 51% of them are female.
Quite a huge percentage there.
Yes.
And there's a misconception that volunteerism is associated with just jobless people. Kindly just demystify for us.
Yeah, I would really, really want to demystify that, and thank you for bringing it out. Volunteerism has not been understood in this country. And I thank God that maybe now going forth, we are going to have the media to help make the society understand what volunteerism is all about. I usually say, and I will repeat again, that volunteerism is not a category of a person. It is a social behavior. What a social behavior is something you will do. That's what you feel good doing. Volunteerism helps make people feel good. So if it is something that I am doing as a social behavior, even if I'm the president of the country, I will still want to go volunteer to make other people's life get better.
All right. There was a research that was done and a report that was launched just a few days back, if I can remember. And some of the recommendations of that report was calling up to set up a national trust fund for volunteers. What importance does this hold?
Yes, there is call to set up a national volunteer trust fund. That is actually in the policy. Those are among the things that are in that policy. That the call to implement the policy is what comes out like a call to set up a national volunteerism trust fund. So the policy has all those things, and we are already set up a multi-sectoral team to work on the implementation framework or implementation matrix, if you want to call it that way. So among the things that policy had come out with are the things that we are now looking at one by one and we are implementing. Other than just the trust fund, we also have the bill, which is currently in draft 2. So the trust fund was actually to be set up by the government because back to your earlier sentiment, if volunteerism in the country is contributing to the GDP up to the level of 3.7%, it is huge. It is above many other sectors. So if it is giving us as a country that kind of development, then what is not good about it, if we plan and budget for it as a government? It will be very prudent for government to plan and budget for it. But for government to spend any single coin for anything, it has to be in the law, it has to be in the policy. So that is why this policy for us in the volunteer sector is a huge thing. It's a good thing. It's actually the best thing for us.
So just pushing for the implementation of this
particular policy. So we are pushing for the implementation. But for now, I can actually say the government has a very good will. So we have not come to a place where we are fighting or pulling from different directions. We are working together, and it is very good that we have reached this far.
All right, just slightly away from that, what's the importance of incorporating volunteerism into the education curriculum? Yeah,
it is very important to work together with the Ministry of Education to see how we can incorporate volunteerism in the curriculum.
And is it already there? And if not, are there plans to ensure that this is inculcated?
It is not there yet, but there is goodwill, so we know it will be there because those are some of the things we are working on from the policy perspective. So the reason why it would be very important is, like I said earlier, it's a social behavior. So a social behavior, you begin to teach young ones while they are still very young. And then when they grow, it is something they love doing. So it doesn't appear that this is a category of a person, like people think volunteer is a category of a person, people who work without pay. So when we grow our children, knowing that we can actually go out there, do some things without expecting much gain from them, just to help other people feel better, then if it comes out as a behavior, it won't be a problem when they are old. Right now, many youth or young people, I may say, for example, are coming into an organization. They want to volunteer simply because there is no job out there. But that is not how we want volunteerism to grow. Otherwise, when the government shall be ready, let's say right now the employment rate is not very good, and unemployment rate has gone so high, that is why many are streaming out there in different organizations and sectors that they want to volunteer. What if the government will do something overnight or after a period of time and they say, now there are jobs. Will we still have volunteers? So we are looking at a long term. In such situation, we want to inculcate this as young as they are in primary. Then they grow up knowing it is not because we don't have a job that we volunteer. We volunteer even if we are cabinet secretaries or we are presidents.
To just push for the spirit of volunteerism. And of course, taking a look, do we have rights of volunteers enshrined in the Constitution?
What is in the Constitution right now is just a normal Bill of Rights. But once we are done with the bill, the National Volunteerism Bill, it has the rights of volunteers, the rights of volunteer managers, the right of volunteer organizations, and the right of beneficiaries enshrined in that bill. So once that bill will be ready and through Parliament and it is passed, it will make part of our laws in the country, and then volunteers will rest and everybody else around volunteer organizations will know everyone's right is taken care of in their bill.
All right. Talk to us about the international practices that Kenya can learn from other countries, and especially those from the Western countries, in terms and in regards to volunteerism.
It is largely out there that countries like Philippines, actually even the time we came up with, we began the work of developing the national volunteerism policy, we looked at other bills around the country, around the world, I mean, and we saw, for example, the bill from Philippines. The volunteerism that is happening in Philippines is big, is very big. And other places like the United States, you realize people go through the formal education, but before you go out there to ask for any job, they look at your CV and realize you have been a volunteer. They look at you as a very precious person. Because if you could do it without pay, what if you are being paid? You know, they realize you can do much, much more. So we have looked at other countries, even Africa. Go to places like Rwanda and you realize they have their old generation volunteerism that is called Omuganda, where they all pull together. It is like what we had back in our country, and it's still there, although we have distorted it a bit, but the spirit of Harambee is basically volunteerism. So when we look across the globe, we realize there are many international organizations and other countries where we can learn a lot around volunteerism and come back and inculcate in our country and in our systems.
Then what's the incentive? I'd like to ask that because what's the incentive? You've talked about the fact that people say, you know, because I don't have a job, I want to go and volunteer. But what's the incentive of a person, even when I'm seated here and I have a job and I say, you know what, I want to go and volunteer? Is it just that moral feeling, good feeling that you get?
I wish you were in a discussion which I'm just coming from. Goodness, that question came. And I think people agree across the board that when you go with a very clear mind that I am going to do it for the betterment of our environment, for the people around us, and everybody else, without expecting the gain, number one thing, that feel good is going to be the automatic. But over and above the feel good, we are, as VIO Society, and in our partnership with the government, the work we are embarking now to do is to help people understand volunteerism. And among them is demystifying the fact that people think volunteerism is about sweeping outside there on the road. And it is largely associated with such kind of things. We have professional volunteers, and categories are many, even in the policy. Now the policy brings it out very clear. We have retirees volunteers, people who retire, but they are not too tired, so they still want to do something, although legally they have retired in the companies or as civil servants, but they have skills they still want to give out there. Those people are a category. And there is also corporate volunteers. Industries and companies like Safaricom have done quite a lot of things around corporate volunteerism. So when you are a member of this company as an employee and you're given maybe a 1 month period to identify a place where you want to volunteer, sometimes you go to that institution and what you do is simply transferring your skills to younger generation who are coming after you and who are admiring that when they grow old they would be like you. So when you have done something like that, it is a huge thing already. The other thing is, I have many, if you would listen to volunteer stories, and in the evening, there will be a few who may say 1 or 2 things about how and what volunteering has done to them in their life. And I'm also one of them, I could still say. I worked in organizations other than the one dealing with volunteering. But part of the things that I achieved, I did not achieve because of the education I have. Sometimes I led people who had better education than me, simply because I grew up in the volunteer sector And so it developed me in terms of leadership skills and other things. So sometimes it is not just what you're going to get and earn directly to your pocket, but in the end, how it builds you. Sometimes you may come back and overtake all those who decided not to volunteer completely from primary. Talk about organizations like Kenya Red Cross. They have set up clubs even in primary schools. I am assuring anyone, if you go out there and realize that this kid had joined the Kenya Red Cross club at an early age, sometimes they do much better. They may not be number one in the in terms of exams and results, but trust me, when they step out there, they are more ready for the job market than any other person.
All right.
Because it is counted to them as experience.
As experience.